In recent centuries, great efforts have been made to make us humans forget where we come from and who we are. The destruction of the old knowledge of physics and biology was particularly powerful in uprooting us. Einstein and Darwin represent the inversion of the old knowledge into a nihilistic worldview, with man as a meaningless, random something, adrift in an endless and cold universe. These anti-life models about reality were perfected only recently, in the 19th century, and could even fully prevail only in the 20th century. Too great was the resistance even in academic circles of the 20th century. The so-called Big Bang theory is a good example to understand how religious esoteric concepts entered science. The Belgian Jesuit and priest Georges Lemaitre created the Big Bang theory, not on the basis of scientific facts, but on the basis of a religious conviction, a notion of a primordial or cosmic seed from which everything evolved. At that time, the Jesuits were given the task of embedding the myths of the origin of the world in a scientific-sounding framework. A few decades later, in 1951, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences accepted the Big Bang theory. This long wait for the Pope's acceptance was not due to opposition from the Church, but from the general public. After all, the Big Bang theory originated in the hands of the Vatican itself. Ironically, the irrational Big Bang theory is still part of our modern worldview, and still not a single proof has been presented. The nihilistic and mechanistic worldview represented by Rousseau and other so-called masterminds of the Enlightenment could only flourish on the breeding ground of industrialization. After all, industrialization turned man into a mechanical being who was reduced to material aspects. Industrialization must be seen as a turning point, and as the most notable event that is still comprehensible and visible to us today as a result of a reset in the 18th or early 19th century. This reset followed an event that also brought about the so-called mud flood. All over the world, the buildings of the old world were partially submerged in the earth, and the former first floors were thus usually converted into cellars. Little is known about the cause of the mud flood, possibly a world war we don't remember or an electromagnetic plasma event. Velikovsky again on this.
C.G. Jung became rather convinced that the unconscious mind, whether by telepathy or in some other way, is a common possession of the entire human race. But it is not only constituted of the experiences of this generation, we who interact in this world today, it includes the cumulative experiences of all generations past. This is more than just telepathy, but something which is brought down from generation to generation. The fact is that catastrophic events have taken place, not just in a cave here or in a cave there, but events of indescribable violence, such that no human being who succeeded to survive could be free from the traumatic effects. Traumatic effects, as I say, indescribable. Imagine, suddenly, time is no more time. The day does not move into the night. The ocean does not just beat at the coast of the Atlantic, it moves over the continent. Not even moves over the continent. Continent and sea just change places. Where were plains, mountains are thrust up in a matter of hours. The air is filled with loud hissing noises of meteorites falling down and all volcanoes erupting simultaneously. Not just the volcanoes that existed, but thousands of new volcanoes coming up and blazing, and rivers losing their beds, and earthquakes removing cities from their foundations. The human history that starts with the invention of writing is hardly 5,000 years old. Any one of you who reached already the age of 25 lived a full 0.5% of the recorded history. Before I finish, I will read you a letter from one of my readers. I feel that the ancients in myth, epic, and sacred works have been trying to tell us something about a problem that bothered them a great deal. It appears fairly clear that our ancestors were trying to communicate a deep fear, a terrible anxiety. They were talking about a problem that was so terrible that the most drastic measures to group discipline and/or self-repression were justified. It was a powerful fear. It is sometimes suggested that the Bible can directly be applied to modern life, and that all the ancients were really writing about were the problems of survival while avoiding neurosis, worries, unhappiness, and so on. To me, that approach is very unconvincing. The God those people were writing about was terrifying. In the Old Testament, he is the God of wrath. And in the New Testament, as Albert Schweitzer, among others, has pointed out, he is about to end the world in Jesus' lifetime or shortly thereafter. He was dangerous and violent. Rock, fire, flood, hurricane, and similar weapons he used on those he judged ill of. That's what the ancients wrote, and I see no point in trying to water it down. That's what they meant. They were really scared. Emanuel Velikovsky.
Morphic resonance is a connection across time from the past to the present. And it's a process that occurs between organized patterns of activity on the basis of similarity. What it means, in effect, is that each species has a kind of collective memory.
According to biologist Rupert Sheldrake, collective memory is inherent to nature. Living systems have a collective memory of all past experiences of the entire species. This memory exists in an invisible but real energy field. Our collective memories are still there, but since the dawn of modernity, they mainly break through in supposedly fictional stories, e.g. in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings universe. Tolkien wrote down his story, rooted in Germanic mythology, during the First World War, at exactly the time that can be recognized as the final destruction of the old magical world. World War I marked the beginning of the civilizational descent into soulless modernity. Perhaps Tolkien had to write down his vision of Middle-earth because the human psyche cannot survive without a connection to reality, even if this connection is maintained via supposedly fictional stories. It is interesting to note in this context that fantasy stories are also an invention of the industrial age. It was only around 1850 that fictional novels became suitable for mass consumption. Could it be that people were not interested in immersing themselves in dissociative worlds as long as life itself was full of meaning and conveyed a higher purpose? The more hostile and cold our society becomes, the stronger becomes the urge to escape into imaginary worlds. And as these imaginary worlds are fed by our collective memories, it is this repressed energy which breathes life into them. With the destruction of religions by so-called science founded by secret societies, people were deprived of one of the last connections to the past. But the truth wants to come to light again, and it will eventually resurface. Enormous efforts are being made to keep humanity asleep because our potential and true power is almost limitless.